Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Best English Podcast. I'm Sophia, your host for today. Have you ever been in a conversation in English, feeling confident, but then suddenly you stop? You can't find the right word, you get stuck on the grammar, and the smooth flow of your speech just disappears. That feeling of pausing, of searching for words while the other person waits. It can be really frustrating, can it? It can knock your confidence and make you feel like fluency is a distant dream. But what if I told you that speaking fluently without those awkward pauses isn't about knowing every single word in the dictionary? It's about building confidence, understanding the rhythm of the language, and learning to think in English. Today, we're going to embark on a journey together, a story that will not only improve your listening skills, but will also give you the tools and the practice you need to speak more smoothly, more naturally, and more confidently. We'll listen to a story, break it down, and practice together, transforming your listening time into active speaking practice. So, find a comfortable spot, take a deep breath, and let's begin this journey to fluent, uninterrupted English. And if you find this journey helpful, make sure to subscribe to the Best English Podcast so you never miss an opportunity to improve with us. Let's dive into our story. We're going to meet a man named Liam. For 10 years, Liam's life was a masterpiece of predictability. A carefully constructed routine that protected him from the messiness of the unknown. He was an accountant at Sterling Paper Solutions, a company as solid and unexciting as its name. His desk on the third floor was his kingdom, a small beige territory where everything had its place. The stapler was always parallel to the edge of the desk. His collection of finely sharpened pencils stood at attention in a ceramic holder, and the family photo, a slightly forced smile from a vacation 5 years ago, was dusted every Monday morning. He didn't just work with numbers, he found comfort in their certainty. A column of figures could always be balanced. An equation always had a correct answer. Numbers didn't have moods or hidden intentions. They were reliable. His days were mapped out to the minute. He'd wake at 6:30, not a minute before or after. His breakfast was always 2 slices of whole wheat toast with a thin layer of marmalade, accompanied by a mug of strong black coffee. At 7:45, he would leave his apartment and walk 12 minutes to the train station, catching the same train, often sitting in the same car. On the train, he wouldn't listen to music or podcasts. He would review the financial news, absorbing data, preparing his mind for the predictable challenges of the day. His colleague, a cheerful, slightly chaotic woman named Maya, often joked about it. "Liam," she'd say, leaning over the partition between their cubicles, "if you were ever 2 minutes late, I'd assume there was a national emergency. You're more reliable than the postman." Liam would offer a small, tight smile. He took it as a compliment. Reliability was his brand. It was who he was. Life was a spreadsheet. And as long as he followed the formulas, everything would add up correctly. Or so he believed. This carefully curated world, painted in shades of gray and beige, was not just his comfort zone. It was his entire universe. He thought this was contentment. He had mistaken predictability for peace. One particular Tuesday morning, however, a tiny crack appeared in the flawless surface of his routine. The train was delayed by 4 minutes due to a signal issue. It was a minor inconvenience for most, but for Liam, it felt like a tremor. He arrived at the office at 8:34. his internal clock screaming in protest. As he walked through the glass doors of Sterling Paper Solutions, he felt off. The usual morning buzz was absent. Instead of the familiar sounds of keyboards clicking and phones ringing, there was a hushed, tense silence. Small groups of colleagues were huddled together, whispering with anxious expressions. They would fall silent as he approached, offering weak, nervous smiles. Maya wasn't at her desk. A cold knot of dread began to form in Liam's stomach. This was not part of the formula. This was an unknown variable. A few minutes later, his department manager, Mr. Henderson, emerged from his glass-walled office. Mr. Henderson was a man who seemed to have been assembled from a corporate catalog: sharp suit, firm handshake, and a smile that was purely functional, never reaching his eyes. "Liam, could I have a word, please?" he asked, his voice flat and devoid of any warmth. The walk to that office felt like a mile. The air inside seemed to have been chilled, and the blinds were drawn, casting the room in sterile gray stripes of light. "Have a seat," Mr. Henderson said, gesturing to the chair opposite his large, empty desk. He didn't sit down himself. He stood, leaning against his desk, a posture of casual power, and then, with the same detached tone one might use to report on quarterly earnings, he delivered the news. The company was undergoing a significant restructuring initiative to optimize workflow and enhance efficiency. He used a lot of corporate jargon, but the message underneath was brutally simple. Liam's position, the one he had dedicated a decade of his life to, had been made redundant. The word hung in the air: redundant, unnecessary, superfluous. It felt less like a business decision and more like a personal judgment. Just like that, 10 years of loyalty, of precision, of being more reliable than the postman were erased. He was handed a standard-issue cardboard box to clear out his desk. His kingdom was to be dismantled in under 15 minutes. He packed his ceramic pencil holder, his financial textbooks, and the wilting plant he always meant to water more often. As he took down the framed photo, he stared at the smiling face of the man he was 5 years ago, completely oblivious to how quickly his solid ground could turn to quicksand. Walking past Maya's empty desk, he realized she was gone too. He didn't even get a chance to say goodbye. As he exited the building, the automatic doors sliding shut behind him with a soft whoosh, the city noise hit him like a physical blow. The cars seemed too loud. The crowds moved with a frantic energy he couldn't comprehend, and he, Liam, the man of routines and predictability, felt completely and utterly lost. He was standing at a major crossroads, a point of sudden and terrifying divergence, but he had no map, no compass, and absolutely no idea which way to turn. What an incredibly disorienting experience for Liam. The careful world he built has just been shattered. Let's look at the language used here. His life is described as a masterpiece of predictability. This is a bit ironic, isn't it? A masterpiece is usually something creative and exciting, but here it's used to describe a life that is the opposite. This shows us how much he valued routine. His colleague Maya says he is more reliable than the postman. This is a common simile, a way of comparing two things using like or as. It emphasizes his punctuality and consistency. It's a friendly way of saying he's extremely dependable. Now, let's focus on the moment he loses his job. Mr. Henderson uses a lot of corporate jargon. Jargon is special words or expressions that are used by a particular profession or group and are difficult for others to understand. Phrases like restructuring initiative and optimize workflow are classic examples. Companies often use this kind of language to make bad news, like laying people off, sound less personal and more like a strategic business decision. The word he uses is redundant. As we discussed before, this is a formal way to say a job is no longer needed. It sounds a bit gentler than saying you're fired, which often implies the employee did something wrong. To be made redundant means the position itself has been eliminated. Let's practice that again, as it's very useful. Imagine explaining the situation to a family member. You could say, "It wasn't my fault. The whole department was restructured, and my role was made redundant." Try saying that sentence out loud. Finally, Liam feels the world has turned to quicksand. Quicksand is a deep mass of wet sand that you can sink into. It's used here as a metaphor for a situation that is unstable and dangerous, where you feel you have no control. His solid ground has become quicksand, and this leads him to be at a crossroads. This is such a powerful idiom. It perfectly captures that feeling of being forced to make a choice that will dramatically affect your future, but having no clear direction. Think about the word crossroads itself. It's where roads cross. You must choose one path. Have you ever felt like your solid ground turned to quicksand? It's a very stressful feeling, and this idiom captures it perfectly. For the next few weeks, Liam was adrift on a gray, featureless ocean of time. The structured framework of his life had been demolished, leaving only empty space. His body, so accustomed to its decade-long rhythm, would still wake him at 6:30. But without the purpose of a commute, a job, a destination, he'd just lie in bed, watching the morning light creep across the ceiling, the silence of his small apartment pressing in on him. The silence was the worst part. He had never noticed how quiet his apartment was during the day. Before, it was just a place to sleep and eat. Now it was a container for his growing anxiety. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to mock him, each tick a reminder of a second wasted, a moment of unemployment stretching into an eternity. He tried to impose a new routine, job hunting. He would sit at his desk from 9 to 5, just as he had at the office, scrolling through job websites, tailoring his resume, and writing cover letters. He sent out applications to every accounting firm in the city and beyond. The effort felt monumental, but the returns were soul-crushing. Most applications disappeared into a digital void, with no response at all. A few resulted in automated rejection emails, their polite, impersonal language feeling more insulting than silence. "We thank you for your interest, but have decided to move forward with other candidates whose qualifications more closely match our needs." Each one was a small, sharp jab at his professional identity. After 10 years of dedicated work, was he now someone who didn't match their needs? The thought gnawed at him. He began to question everything. Were his skills outdated? Was he too old? Had he wasted a decade of his life in a role that made him irrelevant? His apartment started to feel less like a home and more like a prison. He'd find excuses not to go outside. The thought of running into a former colleague, of having to face the inevitable question, "So what are you up to now?" filled him with a paralyzing dread. He started avoiding phone calls, letting them go to voicemail. His world shrank until it was just the four walls of his living room, the glow of his laptop screen, and the relentless ticking of the clock. His younger sister, Clara, was the one who finally broke through the wall he had built around himself. Clara was Liam's polar opposite. Where he saw life in black and white spreadsheets, she saw it in a vibrant, chaotic explosion of color. She was a painter, an artist who worked part-time at a quirky little coffee shop called The Daily Grind to pay her bills. She thrived on spontaneity and human connection, two things Liam had spent his adult life avoiding. She had been calling and texting for days, her messages growing more concerned. "Liam, please pick up. I'm worried about you." Finally, after another rejection email sent him into a spiral of despair, his phone buzzed with her name. This time, he answered. "Liam," she said, her voice a mixture of relief and frustration. "Enough is enough. I can hear the silence in your apartment through the phone. You've been cooped up in there for weeks. It's not healthy. You're going to come and help me at the shop tomorrow." Liam's immediate reaction was a visceral no. The very idea was terrifying. The noise, the people, the unpredictability of it all. It was everything his nature recoiled from. "Clara, that's a ridiculous idea," he said, his voice rusty from disuse. "I'm an accountant. I don't know the first thing about coffee or customer service. I'd be terrible. I'll just get in your way." "I'm not asking you to be a world-class barista," she retorted, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I'm asking you to get out of your apartment and be around human beings. You can wash dishes, clear tables, stock the napkins. Simple things. I need an extra pair of hands, and you need a change of scenery. Besides," her voice softened, "I miss my brother. Please, Liam, just for a day." He was about to refuse again, to retreat back into the safety of his quiet misery, but the genuine plea in her voice stopped him. He was tired of the silence, tired of the rejection, tired of feeling so utterly alone. Maybe she was right. What did he have to lose? A small, hesitant word escaped his lips. "Okay," he said, the sound of it foreign and strange. "Okay, Clara. I'll be there." Let's pause here and look at the language. Liam's state is described as being adrift on a gray, featureless ocean of time. This is a powerful metaphor. An ocean is vast and can be dangerous, and featureless means it has no landmarks. This perfectly captures his feeling of being lost, without direction or purpose. The returns from his job applications were soul-crushing. This is a very strong adjective. If something is soul-crushing, it's not just disappointing, it's so disheartening that it destroys your morale and spirit. Clara says that Liam has been cooped up in his apartment. This is a great phrasal verb. To be cooped up somewhere means to be stuck in a small, confined place for a long time, and it implies a sense of frustration or being trapped. You can imagine chickens in a small coop. It's much more expressive than just saying, "You've been inside." For example, after a long winter, you might say, "I can't wait for spring. I'm tired of being cooped up indoors." Let's practice saying that. "I'm tired of being cooped up indoors." Liam's immediate reaction is described as visceral. A visceral reaction is one that comes from deep, instinctual feeling rather than from logical thought. His no wasn't a calculated decision, it was a gut feeling of fear and resistance. This is a fantastic word to describe a very strong, almost physical emotional response. He then says, "I don't know the first thing about coffee." This is a common and humble-sounding idiom. It means you are completely ignorant about a subject. It's a way of saying, "I have absolutely no experience or knowledge." You could say, "Don't ask me to fix your computer. I don't know the first thing about technology." Try making your own sentence with that phrase. What is something you don't know the first thing about? Just say it to yourself. I don't know the first thing about. This is how you make these phrases your own. The next morning, Liam stood outside the daily grind, feeling a level of anxiety he hadn't experienced since his university exams. The painted sign, a whimsical coffee cup steaming with colorful swirls, seemed almost too cheerful. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door and was immediately enveloped by a wave of sensory information. The rich, earthy smell of freshly ground coffee beans mingled with the sweet, warm scent of cinnamon and melting chocolate. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, recycled air of his old office. The soundtrack of the shop was a complex symphony. The rhythmic hiss and gurgle of the espresso machine, the sharp clink of ceramic on saucer, the low hum of a dozen conversations, and a background of soft indie folk music. It was chaotic, but not unpleasant. It was alive. Clara spotted him from behind the counter, and her face lit up with a brilliant, welcoming smile. She hurried over, untying her flour-dusted apron, and gave him a quick hug. "You came," she whispered, as if she hadn't truly believed he would. "I'm so glad." "Now, don't look so terrified. It's just coffee." She handed him a plain black apron. Tying it around his waist felt like putting on a costume for a play he hadn't rehearsed. "Okay," she said, "all business now. Rule number 1, smile. Rule number 2, if you don't know the answer to something, just find me. Your mission for the next hour is simple. See that table? They just left. I need you to clear their cups and plates, wipe it down, and make it look nice for the next person. That's it. You can do that, right?" Liam nodded, his throat suddenly dry. He approached the table with the caution of a bomb disposal expert. He felt clumsy, his movements stiff and awkward. The cups clattered loudly as he stacked them. He was convinced every single person in the shop was watching him, judging his every move. He nearly dropped a sticky plate, his heart lurching into his throat. His face burned with embarrassment. In his old job, he was competent, an expert even. Here, he felt like a child on his first day of school. The first hour was a blur of self-consciousness and fumbled tasks. A sudden lunch rush flooded the small shop with people, and the volume and pace intensified. Orders were being called out, the coffee grinder whirred, the steamer shrieked. It was overwhelming. But as the morning rush began to subside, something inside Liam began to shift. He started to look up from the tabletops he was so intensely focused on cleaning. He began to notice the details of the world around him. He saw an elderly woman, Mrs. Gable, carefully folding her newspaper, a contented smile on her face as she savored a scone. He watched a young graphic designer named Marco, who had turned his small table into a mobile office, sketch furiously in a notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration. He saw two friends laughing so hard, one of them had to wipe tears from her eyes. This wasn't just a place where people bought coffee. It was a hub of human life, a stage for countless tiny dramas and joys. He started to relax. His shoulders, which had been tensed up to his ears, began to drop. A woman offered him a warm, genuine smile as he cleared her table, and he found himself smiling back without even thinking about it. It felt nice. A young tourist asked him for directions to the art gallery, and instead of panicking, Liam found he knew the answer and confidently pointed the way. He even managed a brief, pleasant conversation with a regular about the unseasonably sunny weather. Each small, successful interaction was like a drop of water on the dry, cracked desert of his confidence. By the time Clara told him he could take a break, Liam felt an exhaustion that was completely different from the mental fatigue he was used to. It wasn't the draining tiredness from staring at a computer screen. It was the satisfying weariness that comes from a day of physical movement and genuine human connection. As he untied the apron, he looked at his sister. "See?" she said, her eyes twinkling. "That wasn't so bad, was it?" And Liam had to admit, with a shock of surprise, that it really wasn't. In fact, for the first time in a month, the relentless, anxious ticking in his head had finally gone quiet. He felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a very long time, a spark of purpose. This part of the story is rich with descriptive language. Let's explore it. The coffee shop is described as a hub of human life. A hub is the central or most important part of a place or activity. Think of the hub of a wheel. Calling the shop a hub emphasizes its role as a central meeting point for the community. The story also uses sensory details to bring the shop to life. The rich, earthy smell, the hiss and gurgle of the machine, the clink of ceramic. When you're telling a story, using details that appeal to the five senses, smell, sound, sight, taste, and touch, makes it much more immersive for your listener. Liam's initial feelings are described vividly. He approaches the table with the caution of a bomb disposal expert. This is a hyperbole, an exaggeration used for effect. Of course, clearing a table is not as dangerous as defusing a bomb, but this comparison humorously emphasizes how nervous and careful he was. His heart lurched into his throat. This is a great idiom to describe a sudden feeling of shock, fear, or excitement. It gives a very physical sense of that sudden jolt of adrenaline. But then we see a change. He found himself smiling back. This is a very natural and subtle way to describe an action that is unplanned and almost unconscious. It suggests the smile was genuine, not forced, and that this positive change is happening within him without him even realizing it at first. Each successful interaction is described as a drop of water on the dry, cracked desert of his confidence. This is a beautiful metaphor. It paints a picture of his confidence being completely depleted, like a desert, and shows how these small positive moments are slowly starting to restore it. This kind of figurative language makes your English more poetic and powerful. Try to think of a metaphor to describe a feeling you've had recently. For example, if you were very busy, you could say, "My week was a whirlwind of activity." Practicing this will help you think more creatively in English. Liam started helping out at the Daily Grind 3 days a week. At first, he told himself it was just a temporary fix, a way to structure his days and get out of the apartment while he continued his real job search. But as the weeks passed, the accounting job websites on his laptop gathered digital dust. He found himself genuinely looking forward to his shifts, to the familiar controlled chaos and the comforting aroma of coffee. He was becoming part of the ecosystem of the shop. He learned the complex, unspoken rules of the morning rush. He learned the names and orders of the regulars. There was Mrs. Gable, the retired history teacher, who always wanted her scone warmed for exactly 30 seconds, and her Earl Grey tea with just a splash of milk. There was Marco, the freelance designer, who needed his Americano extra strong and always sat at the table with the best access to the power outlet. There were Sarah and Ben, the young couple who had their first date in the shop and now came every Saturday, arguing playfully over who got to have the last bite of their shared cinnamon roll. Liam didn't just learn their orders, he learned their stories. He learned that Mrs. Gable was writing her memoirs, that Marco was struggling with a creative block on a big project, and that Sarah and Ben were saving up to buy their first apartment. He became a quiet keeper of these small human details, a friendly face who would listen for a few minutes while the espresso machine worked its magic. He discovered a surprising aptitude for this new role. His methodical, detail-oriented nature, which had served him so well in accounting, made him incredibly efficient. He could remember a long list of complicated orders without writing them down. He reorganized the chaotic storage room, creating a logical system that saved everyone time. He even balanced the daily cash register down to the last penny, a task that always gave Clara a headache. But it was more than just efficiency. He was discovering a softer, more intuitive side of himself. He learned to read people's moods. He knew when a customer needed a quick, efficient transaction and when they needed a moment of friendly chatter. He learned that sometimes the most important service you could offer wasn't coffee. It was a kind word or a patient ear. One particularly bleak, rainy Tuesday afternoon, the shop was nearly empty. The rhythmic drumming of the rain against the window was the only sound. Clara was in the back room, wrestling with a new inventory system, leaving Liam in charge of the front. An older gentleman named Arthur, a quiet man who came in a few times a week and always ordered a simple black coffee, sat alone at his usual corner table. He wasn't reading his newspaper as he usually did. He was just staring out at the rain-streaked street, his shoulders slumped, an aura of profound sadness surrounding him. Liam felt a pang of empathy. On a whim, he brewed a pot of fresh chamomile tea, known for its calming qualities. He poured a cup, placed it on a saucer with a small biscuit, and walked over to Arthur's table. "It's on the house," Liam said softly, so as not to startle him. He placed the steaming mug on the table. "It's a dreary day. I thought this might be nicer than coffee right now." Arthur looked up, his eyes hazy with unshed tears. He seemed genuinely surprised by the gesture. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a low, trembling voice, he began to speak. He told Liam that it was the anniversary of his wife's passing. He spoke of the suffocating loneliness he felt, how the house was so empty and quiet, and how rainy days like this always made the grief feel heavier. Liam didn't interrupt. He didn't offer advice or empty platitudes like, "She's in a better place," or "Time will heal." He just pulled up a chair and listened. He listened as Arthur spoke of his wife, their life together, and the gaping hole her absence had left behind. When Arthur finally fell silent an hour later, a small measure of peace seemed to have settled on his features. As he stood up to leave, he placed a frail hand on Liam's shoulder. "Thank you, young man," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea how much this meant to me." After Arthur left, Liam stood by the window, watching the rain fall. In that moment, he understood that he wasn't just pouring drinks and taking money. He was facilitating moments of human connection. He was the temporary keeper of a small, warm, safe space in a large, often indifferent city. The thought of returning to a silent office, to a world of numbers that had no stories to tell, suddenly felt not just unappealing, but completely and utterly unbearable. This is such a pivotal section of the story. Let's break down some of the language. Liam becomes the quiet keeper of people's stories. This is a lovely phrase. A keeper is someone who looks after something. By calling him a keeper of stories, it suggests he values and protects these personal details, which shows his growing empathy. He discovers he has an aptitude for this new role. Aptitude is a natural ability to do something. It's similar to the word knack we discussed earlier, but perhaps a bit more formal. For example, she has a great aptitude for learning languages. The interaction with Arthur is key. The weather is described as bleak. This word means cold, miserable, and without charm. It perfectly reflects Arthur's mood. It's an example of pathetic fallacy, where the weather mirrors the emotions of a character. Liam offers Arthur a tea on the house. As a reminder, this means it's free, a gift from the business. It's a gesture of kindness. Liam avoids using empty platitudes. A platitude is a remark or statement, especially one with a moral content, that has been used too often to be interesting or thoughtful. They are often what people say when they don't know what else to say. Liam's choice to simply listen is far more powerful. This shows a deep emotional intelligence that he probably didn't know he had. The final realization is profound. He understands he is facilitating moments of human connection. To facilitate means to make an action or process easy or easier. He's not creating the connection, but he is creating the environment where it can happen. He is the temporary keeper of a small, warm, safe space. This is his new identity. It's not accountant. It's something much more human. The thought of going back to his old life is now unbearable. This strong word tells us that a return is no longer possible for him. He has changed too much. This isn't just a temporary job anymore, it's becoming his calling. As the weeks melted into months, the idea of being an accountant began to feel like a memory from someone else's life. The crisp suit hanging in his closet looked like a costume. The financial textbooks on his shelf seemed to be written in a foreign language. His entire being was recalibrating to the rhythms of the daily grind. He learned to anticipate the morning rush like a seasoned sailor reading the tides. He knew that a rainy day meant more customers seeking refuge and a higher demand for hot chocolate. He knew that on sunny afternoons, people would want iced lattes and a seat by the window. He was no longer just Clara's brother who helped out. He was Liam, the guy who remembered your name, who asked about your kids, and who could calm the chaos of a 6-person order with a steady hand and a reassuring smile. He found himself invested in the lives of the people who passed through the shop. He celebrated with Marco when he finally broke his creative block and landed a huge new client, a success that had been fueled by countless cups of coffee and quiet encouragement. He gave Sarah and Ben a bottle of sparkling apple cider on the house when they announced they had finally had their offer accepted on their first apartment. He sat with Mrs. Gable and looked at old photographs for her memoirs, listening to her stories of a city that no longer existed. He was weaving himself into the fabric of this small community, and in doing so, he was weaving a new identity for himself, one stitch at a time. One Thursday evening, they had just locked the front door. The shop was quiet and dark, save for a single light above the counter. The air was thick with the lingering scent of coffee grounds and toasted sugar. Liam was meticulously wiping down the stainless steel milk steamer, while Clara was cashing up the register. A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind that only exists between people who know each other implicitly. Clara finished counting the money and then leaned against the counter, a thoughtful, almost nervous expression on her face. "You know," she began, breaking the silence, her voice soft. "I was thinking about how things were before you came. I was struggling. I was so passionate about the coffee and the atmosphere, but I was overwhelmed by the business side of things. I was barely breaking even most months." She took a deep breath. "Since you've been here, everything has changed. You've organized the inventory, streamlined the ordering, and you've somehow managed the finances so well that we're actually profitable. But it's more than that. You have this presence. You're a calming force, Liam. The customers adore you. You connect with them in a way I never could. You've brought a kind of steady, quiet strength to this place." She fiddled with a stray napkin, not quite meeting his eyes. "This was always my dream, but I think I was missing a piece of the puzzle. And I think that piece is you." Liam stopped wiping the machine, his heart starting to beat a little faster. He had a feeling where this was going. "I can't afford to pay you a proper salary," she continued, finally looking up at him, her eyes shining with earnestness. "Not what you're used to, anyway. But I was wondering, how would you feel about becoming a partner? We could run this place together. 50-50, officially." Liam felt the world tilt on its axis. He stood there, frozen, the damp cloth still in his hand. A partner? A co-owner? The words echoed in the quiet shop. He had spent his entire adult life following a predetermined path, climbing a corporate ladder that someone else had built. The idea of building something for himself, from the ground up, with his sister, it was both the most exciting and the most terrifying thought he'd ever had. All his old insecurities, the ones that had whispered to him in the dark during those first weeks of unemployment, came roaring back. Was he good enough? Was he qualified? What if he failed and ruined his sister's dream? It was one thing to be a helpful employee. It was another thing entirely to be responsible for the success or failure of a business, for the livelihoods of the people they might hire. He looked at Clara's hopeful face, and then he looked around the familiar, comforting space of the coffee shop, his unexpected sanctuary. This was it. Another crossroads. But this time, the choice wasn't just about what he would do. It was about who he was going to be. This is the climax of the story. Let's look at the language Clara uses. She admits she was barely breaking even. This is a common business idiom that means your income is just enough to cover your costs with no profit. It's a precarious situation for any business. She says Liam is a calming force and the missing piece of the puzzle. Both are wonderful compliments. The puzzle metaphor suggests that the business was incomplete without him, that his skills and personality were essential for its success. Her proposal is very emotional and personal, which is why it has such a strong impact on Liam. Liam's reaction is described with the phrase, "the world tilt on its axis." This is an idiom used to describe a moment of great shock or surprise that changes your perspective on everything. It's a very dramatic and effective way to convey his feelings. His insecurities came roaring back. We've seen the phrase flooding back before. Roaring back is similar but perhaps even more powerful, like the roar of a lion. It suggests the insecurities are loud, aggressive, and demand to be heard. He realizes the choice is not just about what to do, but who he was going to be. This is a crucial distinction. This decision is not just about a job, it's about his fundamental identity. Will he be Liam the accountant, the safe, predictable numbers guy? Or will he be Liam the entrepreneur, the community builder, the coffee shop owner? This internal question makes the decision much more meaningful. This is the central conflict of the story reaching its peak. What path will he choose? We are left in suspense, waiting for his answer. Liam didn't give Clara an answer that night. The question was too big, the implications too vast. He told her he needed some time to think, a phrase that felt like a laughable understatement for the internal hurricane the offer had unleashed. That night, sleep was impossible. He lay awake in his silent apartment, the same apartment that had once felt like a prison, and stared at the familiar shadows on the ceiling. His mind was a battlefield, with logic and emotion waging a fierce war. The logical side, the accountant side, was screaming at him. It presented a clear, bullet-pointed list of risks. The financial instability of a small business, the long, grueling hours, the lack of a pension plan or health benefits, the fact that he had zero formal training in hospitality or management. Logic told him to be sensible. He should politely decline, continue his job search, find another stable accounting position, and get his life back on the predictable track it had been on before. That was the safe bet. That was the smart move. But then there was his heart. His heart didn't think in bullet points. It thought in moments. It reminded him of the look on Arthur's face when he had someone to talk to about his wife. It replayed the sound of Marco's triumphant shout when he landed his big client. It conjured the taste of the new lemon and poppy seed muffin Clara had perfected last week. His heart reminded him of the feeling of belonging, of being part of something that mattered, even on a small scale. It was a path full of uncertainty, yes, but it was also a path that felt vibrant and alive, a stark contrast to the monochrome existence he had known before. He finally got out of bed around 3 a.m. and went to his desk. He took out a fresh sheet of paper and a pen. He drew a line down the middle. On one side, he wrote Sterling Paper Solutions, and on the other, The Daily Grind. Under the first heading, he listed the pros: stability, good salary, benefits, prestige, clear path for promotion. Under the second, he wrote Clara, community, purpose, creativity, joy. Then he started a cons list. For the coffee shop, the list was long: financial risk, long hours, stress, uncertainty. For the accounting firm, he paused. What were the cons? He had never considered them before. He wrote down monotony, isolation, lack of meaning, feeling like a small cog in a huge machine. As he looked at the two lists, he had a profound realization. The pros of the accounting job were all external, things society tells you are important. The pros of the coffee shop were all internal, things that made him feel genuinely happy and fulfilled. The fear of failure was real, but the fear of returning to a life that was safe but empty was suddenly much, much greater. He thought about his old boss, Mr. Henderson, with his functional smile and detached demeanor. He never wanted to become that. He picked up his phone and typed a short message to a number he hadn't contacted in months. It was to Maya, his old colleague. "Hi, Maya. It's Liam. Strange question, but were you ever truly happy there?" He didn't expect a reply in the middle of the night, but his phone buzzed almost instantly. "Happy?" "Liam, I was dying of boredom. I took the redundancy payout, and I'm back in school studying landscape design. Terrified, but I've never felt more alive. Why do you ask?" Reading her words was like a final confirmation. She had felt it too. She had taken a leap of faith. The knot of anxiety in his stomach didn't disappear, but it changed. It morphed from the cold, paralyzing fear of failure into a warm, buzzing excitement of possibility. The choice, which had felt so monumental and impossible, was suddenly, miraculously, crystal clear. This is a fantastic exploration of Liam's decision-making process. The narrator describes his mind as a battlefield, with logic and emotion waging a fierce war. This personification of his thoughts as two opposing armies is a very effective way to illustrate his internal conflict. The accountant's side is making a safe bet. In gambling, a safe bet is one that is likely to win but doesn't offer a huge reward. This perfectly describes the accounting career path for him. His heart, on the other hand, didn't think in bullet points. It thought in moments. This is a beautiful line that highlights the different ways we make decisions. Some are based on data and logic, others on feeling and experience. The story shows the power of emotional data in making life-changing choices. The exercise of writing the pros and cons list is a turning point. He realizes the difference between external validation, money, status, and internal fulfillment, joy, purpose. This is a very mature and important realization for any person to have. Contacting his old colleague, Maya, is a brilliant addition. It serves as an external validation for his internal feelings. He learns he wasn't alone in his dissatisfaction. Her response, "Terrified, but I've never felt more alive," perfectly mirrors the choice he is about to make. She took a leap of faith. This is a common idiom that means to do something even though you are not sure it is right or will have a good result. It's about trusting in the unknown. Her message gives him the final push he needs. The fear morphed from a negative feeling into a positive one. To morph means to change smoothly from one image or state to another. This word choice shows the gradual but complete transformation of his fear into excitement. And finally, the decision becomes crystal clear, signifying the end of his conflict and the beginning of his new path. The next morning, Liam woke up before his alarm for the first time in as long as he could remember. The usual 6:30 wake-up call wasn't needed. A sense of calm, purposeful energy had taken its place. The dread that had been his shadow for months was gone. He showered, got dressed, and walked to the daily grind with a new lightness, a spring in his step that felt unfamiliar and wonderful. When he arrived, Clara was already there, her back to the door as she anxiously restocked the pastry case. Her shoulders were tense, and he could tell she had barely slept, waiting for his answer. He quietly walked up behind her. "I've been thinking about our branding," he said calmly. Clara jumped, startled, and spun around. Her face was a canvas of worry and sleeplessness. "Liam, you scared me. I think we need a new tagline," he continued, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Something like, 'The Daily Grind, your community coffee house.'" He then looked her directly in the eye. "What do you think, partner?" Clara stared at him for a second, the words slowly registering. Then her face broke into a radiant, teary-eyed grin of pure relief and joy. She let out a little laugh that was half a sob and threw her arms around him, hugging him so tightly he could barely breathe. "Are you serious?" she muffled into his shoulder. "Are you absolutely 100% sure?" He hugged her back just as tightly. "I've never been more sure of anything in my entire life," he said, and he knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in his bones, that it was the truth. From that day forward, their partnership was official. Liam dove headfirst into his new role, not just as a helper, but as a builder. He handled all the behind-the-scenes work that had once overwhelmed Clara, creating efficient systems for payroll, inventory, and supplier negotiations. His old skills found a new home, not in service of a faceless corporation, but in service of their shared dream. But he never hid in the back office. His place was out front. He spent weeks practicing on the espresso machine after hours. His first attempts at latte art were disastrous, producing milky blobs that looked more like clouds or ghosts than hearts. But he kept at it, and eventually he could produce a respectable, if slightly wobbly, heart on top of a cappuccino, a small victory that made him ridiculously proud. Together, Liam and Clara were a formidable team. His calm, logical approach was the perfect anchor for her creative, sometimes chaotic energy. They complemented each other perfectly. They decided to expand the menu, adding soups and sandwiches to attract a lunch crowd. They started a loyalty card program, a simple idea that made their regulars feel even more appreciated. Their biggest new venture was hosting a weekly open mic night on Fridays. Liam was initially terrified of the idea, imagining noise and chaos, but Clara persuaded him. The first night was magical. The shop was packed with people. A young student played hauntingly beautiful melodies on his guitar. A woman in her 60s read a moving poem about her childhood. Even Marco, the designer, got up and told a series of surprisingly hilarious jokes. The coffee shop was filled with applause, laughter, and a palpable sense of community. Liam stood at the back, watching it all, a tray of empty mugs in his hand and a feeling of profound contentment in his heart. He was no longer the man who lived in a world of predictable grays and beiges. His life was now a vibrant, messy, and beautiful canvas of colors, sounds, and connections. He had lost a secure job, a predictable career path, and a handsome salary. But what he had gained in return was immeasurable. He had found a purpose, a passion, a community, and most importantly, he had found himself. He had learned that sometimes the scariest leaps of faith are the ones that teach you how to fly, and that the most unexpected detours in life often lead you exactly where you were always meant to be. What a beautiful and satisfying conclusion to Liam's story. Let's look at a few final pieces of language. Liam greets Clara with a business idea instead of a simple yes. This shows how much he has already embraced the new role in his mind. He is already thinking like a partner. His first latte art attempts were disastrous. This is a great word for something that is a complete failure. His final product is a respectable heart. Respectable here means it's adequate or fairly good. It's not perfect, but it's good enough to be proud of. They become a formidable team. Formidable is a strong adjective, meaning they are impressive and powerful when working together. It suggests they are a great success. The open mic night has a palpable sense of community. Palpable means a feeling so intense that it seems as if you could touch it. So, the sense of community wasn't just an idea. It was a strong feeling that everyone in the room could experience. This is a very advanced and descriptive word. The final message of the story is summarized beautifully. He had gained something immeasurable. This means it's so large or great that it cannot be measured. You can't put a price on happiness or purpose. He learned that the scariest leaps of faith are the ones that teach you how to fly. This is a powerful metaphor that links the idea of taking a risk with the reward of personal growth and freedom. And finally, the idea of unexpected detours leading you to your true destination. A detour is a longer, indirect route. In life, a detour is an unexpected change in your plans. Liam's job loss was a massive detour, but it led him to a much happier place. This is a wonderfully optimistic message to end on. So, what can we take away from this expanded journey with Liam? We've seen his world fall apart and then come back together in a much more beautiful way. We have practiced so much vocabulary. We've talked about everything from corporate jargon to visceral reactions, from being soul-crushed to finding something palpable. We've explored idioms like safe bet, leap of faith, and a spring in your step. These are the building blocks of fluency. The more you can weave these expressions into your own speech, the more natural and confident you will sound. The goal is not just to understand them when you hear them, but to make them an active part of your own vocabulary. Now, let's do some final practice to help all of this sink in. As before, I'll ask you some questions. Take your time and answer them out loud. The physical act of speaking is crucial. First question. Before he was laid off, how did Liam view his highly structured and predictable life? What words or phrases from the story can you use to describe it? Second question. Describe the contrast between Liam's old office at Sterling Paper Solutions and the coffee shop, the daily grind. Try to use some of the sensory details from the story. Third question. Think about the interaction with Arthur, the grieving widower. Why was Liam's response, just listening, more effective than offering empty platitudes? What does this show about how Liam had changed? Fourth question. When Clara offered Liam the partnership, his mind was described as a battlefield. What were the two opposing sides in this battle, and what were their main arguments? And the final, most important question. Have you ever had an unexpected detour in your own life? A plan that changed, a door that closed? Did it, like for Liam, lead you to an unexpected but positive new place? Try to tell that story, even if it's just a short version in English. Wow, fantastic work today. You have listened to a long, detailed story, and you have actively engaged with the language. That is a huge achievement. Liam's journey is a powerful reminder that change, even when it is scary and unwelcome, can be an opportunity for incredible growth. It's also a reminder that communication and connection are at the heart of a fulfilling life. Every new word you learn is a new way to connect with the world and the people in it. Thank you so much for your time and your focus today on the Best English Podcast. I hope you feel inspired and more confident. Fluency is built day by day, story by story, conversation by conversation. You are on the right path. If you found this extended story helpful, please subscribe and consider leaving a comment to tell me about a leap of faith you've taken in your own life. I would love to read your stories. Until our next episode, keep listening, keep learning, and most importantly, keep speaking.